I'm Cameron Munter, President and CEO of the EastWest Institute in New York. At this time, we're thinking about what happened 25 years ago, the end of the Soviet Union, and the beginning of what many thought was a new world. What we've heard from a number of our friends from Eastern Europe was that in 1989, there was no thought that communism would go away. They said the mountains will go away before communism will go away. And for these people who went through that experience, it was a shocking time, and I think they were probably marked by it, and everything that's happened since has been in part defined by that experience. The United States at that time concluded that it had done everything right, that it was the natural role of the United States to emerge as the one superpower, and the United States didn't go through a kind of a wrenching change like the people of the Soviet Union did, like the people of Eastern Europe did. I think what we're seeing now, 25 years later, is that perhaps through the advent of things like populism and the dissatisfaction that marks political life in the West, the United States and the West is also undergoing that feeling that things are not what they always were and that great change is in the air. When we think about how the events of 25 years ago have shaped the U.S. Russian relationship today, there's both the question of American intent and the question of Russian interpretation. The American intent, for those of us who were diplomats at that time, was that we were going to see a Russia that was going to be integrated into a worldwide system that was going to be prosperous, democratic, and where people were going to be at peace with their neighbors. That was not clearly interpreted that way in Russia. The events of the 1990s, the destabilization of a system which, despite its faults, had been seemed very stable to the people who lived there in Russia, undercut the validity of the Western claim in the mind of Russians. Certainly the financial crisis of 1998 played a big role in that. And it's clear that by the time Putin took power, there was a feeling that that had been a disastrous decade. It wasn't at all something that was leading them to a more prosperous integration into the West. It's anyone's guess to see how Trump and Putin will get along. Some people claim that these people are very similar. Some people say that there's a certain practicality to both people, a certain sense that they're both people who think of interests above values, or people who are doing deals rather than thinking of long-term implications. I think most of those theories are a little bit too simple, and while I don't have an overarching theory of my own that is complex and all-encompassing, I think we simply have to wait and see how these two people, A, get along with each other, but B, work within the institutional structures of their countries, the security structures, the economic structures, and the trends that are going on in both countries that are far bigger and longer lasting than any one leader. Finally, both of them are going to have to cope with a series of crises. So this is not just a question of Russia and the United States. Putin and Trump are going to have to deal with Syria. Putin and Trump are going to have to deal with China. Putin and Trump are going to have to deal with how trade is organized. And so it's many layers that we're going to see this relationship develop. And I think it's wise to say, let's give this a few months before we draw any real conclusions about that relationship.